to another video of Chloe Gives Away Oxford Secrets. I decided to finally start shooting this video. I basically talk about each of my Oxford interviews in great detail, and I tell you what they asked me and how they asked me and who asked me and basically everything you want to know about the interview. Today's is going to be about my politics interview. If you have watched my overall Oxford interview experience, then you'll know this, but if not, I'll give you the short version. 3rd of December to the 6th of December, 4 interviews in total, 1 for politics, 1 for philosophy, 2 for econ. The politics interview took place 3rd day I was at Oxford in the morning at around 10 a.m. You go up to the Old Lodge, which is the place in Hertford where all these seniors and juniors and the volunteers are there, and they're gonna basically take you to your interview location. So you go there about 20 minutes, 10 minutes. I went there half an hour because I was really nervous. Bring you to the building, you wait in a waiting room, and then you wait until the professor tutor comes and gets you, brings you to the secret location, and you begin your interview. For politics, it was in the same building as my philosophy interview, so I've already been there. I was just sitting there waiting. Professors come to take me exactly on the dot. We go up to my politics interview. I happened to be the last candidate scheduled because first there's philosophy interview and then econ and then politics, so I happened to be the last candidate of all the other candidates. So my interview could go a little longer. Mine lasted around 25, almost 30 minutes. Usually they're around 20 minutes. So this one was pretty long. And I went there, I went into the room, I sat on the sofa, which was the only seat offered because the professors would sit at your two sides. Both were male professors. One was older than the other. One had a UK British accent and one had a more exotic European accent. One professor would ask you a question and then the other professor would ask you another question and so on and so forth. First question that I was asked was regarding the examination that I had, the pre-interview examination. So there was one part in the examination where they introduced a little bit of game theory. So they talked about this person, I forgot her name, but there was this abstract person who wanted to do good things, but somehow whenever she tried to do them, the outcome would always be bad. And we also know that the only reason why she wants to do good things is because she enjoys it for her own personal, cruel intentions. So essentially, bad person with bad personality wants to do good things, ends up always doing bad things. That's the train of logic we had here, right? And then we were to judge and talk about whether is this person morally good, or make a moral judgment about this person. So first question was something regarding that. And then we transitioned into what is justice. And they asked me, what do you think justice is in the exam? And I wrote an answer. I forgot what answer I wrote. But then in the interview, they asked me that again. Building upon your answer, what do you think justice would represent in a society? Or what do you think makes justice something that you can enforce in a society? Things like that. And then my next question was actually quite surprising because I remember this very vividly. The professor on my left said, as he flipped through a file, presumably my file, and he said, "Do your other professors tell you comments?" And I was like, "No." And he said, "Well, one of your interviewers in their evaluation of you said that you were very fair and rational, giving perspectives on both sides of the issue." And I was very flattered. I didn't say I was flattered. I was like, "Oh, okay, that's nice." I said something like that. And then he said, "What do you think fairness and rationality is, and how do you think it manifests in society?" And I was like, partially, I knew this was going to happen. So then I started talking about basically different, I'll omit my answers here, but that was the question that he asked me and I answered it honestly in the way I thought. And then the professor on my right then asked a question and he asked it in terms of what I wrote in my UCAS essay. So if you haven't listened to my UCAS essay or my tips on my UCAS essay, then you can go watch that in that video. But he asked me about my UCAS essay, something I wrote about tyranny of the majority, and then he asked me, did I think it was possible to avoid it? Did I think it was necessarily a bad thing? And how would I connect it to moral judgment? Whether, did I think that tyranny of the majority was something that you could morally judge to be good or bad? And what are some instances where this manifests? Something like that. When I say these questions, they all seem very long, they didn't say that entire block to me at once. It was usually one question, I gave an answer, and then they would reinforce another question, and they gave an answer, and so on and so forth. Okay, so those were the interview questions. I know they're all very broad, but those were the ones that I remembered. It was only like a 20 plus minute video, and each question there was a back and forth. So when you think about it, you talk for about 4 or 5 minutes, they ask the question, clarify the question, and that's about it, right? So for the tyranny of the majority question, that took up about 7 minutes to 8 minutes in total. It was a pretty lengthy discussion because the professor talked about this specific example where him and I wanted to get McDonald's and the other professor wanted to get salad, and then he asked me, how would you absolve this issue? It's 2 versus 1. What should we do in this case? Is there a point to compromising? Was the subtext I read from that. And then I pointed out, I said that this is a very classic example of tyranny of the majority. If we were only to listen to the majority, in the case where it was a 51% versus 49%, these were the implications of that. However, if you look at it from a societal point of view, there is no other way for you to enforce certain laws. But then I said again, but then we also have the question of whether is this a moral judgment, right? Is this something correct that we should be doing? Because the fact that society is doing so is completely different from whether society should be doing so. And then I point out that tension, and then I pointed out how we should like compromise and things like that. And then the other professor, and who usually doesn't talk when the other professor is asking me a question, but the professor on my left asked me, then what do you think should be done? Or, I don't think your compromising method works, and then I rebutted his point, and he rebutted my point, and the other professor also responded to my point, and it was just like a very conversational, more like a discussion based. I always say rebut because I was in like presentation mode, and as an MUN person / debater, it was very natural for me to mix in that like, courteous, respect, and diplomacy, along with my very direct and precise answers. Yeah. Overall, I would rank my personal performance in that interview maybe a 7 or 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10. There were some questions that I felt I didn't answer as specifically, or I didn't answer with my entire capacity, partially because of the time constraints, because they do cut you off if you go on rambling for too long. But I also gave myself that score, which is pretty high, because I felt that instead of rambling on, I tried to structure my answers. But we'll talk about like overall interview tips in another video. That's basically all I have for my politics interview breakdown and insider's view. If you guys want more specificity, let me know in the comments. There are definitely some things that I missed, but these are all the things that I remember, and I provided you guys with the questions, or at least the majority of the questions that I could remember, and some of the back and forths in this video. So I hope that was helpful. Yeah. Watch my other videos. Subscribe. I am wearing maroon. I am completely comfortable wearing my other university color while giving you guys the breakdown on Oxford. I don't know what this says about me. It doesn't say anything about me.